Hi, so welcome to our episode today of the Expat Experts. I'm really happy. We've got a good friend of mine, Mr. Ahmad Nizam Abbas, all the way from Singapore. So he came to join us in Dubai, and it's his first time in Dubai as well. And he's come to join us for our event that we had yesterday. So thank you so much for coming to that. And then also being our guest speaker today as well at our podcast. We can find out a bit more about your speciality, because I think it's fascinating. So even yesterday when I was introducing you to people, everybody was like, oh, okay, what's all this about? And it's very good, because what I want to discuss today with you is just how similar it is as well in the UAE, where you've got two branches of Muslim and non-Muslim family law. But we'll get to that shortly. So firstly, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then Alexandra will ask some questions as well.
Right. Thank you, Samar, for having me and for being such an amazing host
Thank you.
these last few days. Yeah, I'm surprised myself that this is my first time in Dubai. It's like, why have I not been here before? Amazing country, wonderful people, right? And the buildings, so beautiful, right? Morning to you too, Alexandra.
Morning.
Right. So a little bit of myself. My name is Ahmad Nizam Abbas. You can call me Ahmad or Nizam. I come from Singapore, right? But I studied in the UK, and that's where I learned about the UK system. But now in Singapore, I specialize in family law. I've been trained in the civil law. But in Singapore, we do have Muslim law that is practiced, but it's never been taught in schools. So for the last 30 years, it's been more or less a self-study. So you build up your own research materials, you look up articles, you go to the library, you ask seniors. And in my case, I ended up loving the subject so much that I got into I got into teaching the subject. I was invited by the local universities to create a course, and I've done that. And for the first 2 years, I realized that the students didn't have a textbook. So it coincided with COVID. And we had a lot of time during COVID, right? And I got some young lawyers to help me. We harnessed all our energies, used all the COVID time, and we came out with a book called The Muslim Family Law in Singapore. It's now not only used in the textbook, it's an often cited book by the judges in the courts as well.
No, I think this is brilliant. Yeah, so unfortunately, he didn't bring us a copy. So he was rushing to get here.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to kind of rush back as well to Singapore tonight, right?
Yes.
So yeah, you didn't bring us a copy, but it's fine. I'm sure we'll get one next time. But I'll pass you on to Alex to ask some questions as well.
So thank you for being here. In terms of your sort of legal career, we understand that you have your own practice. So would you like to speak to us a little bit about that and what you do perhaps on a daily basis?
Right. Well, I've moved quite a fair bit in the last 30 years. I started up with a small firm, then I went to a medium-sized firm, and it grew to a large firm.
Okay.
And a couple of years ago, it was, I need to be careful here, it was combined with a very large firm in the United States with offices in many countries. And I love the people there. I love the culture. I love interacting with people from all over the world. But I felt that I was not a good fit because the structure was very corporate. And they only wanted to focus on big corporate matters.
Okay.
But my personal love is actually in personal law, family law, right? Marriage, divorce, inheritance.
So I'm just going to stop you there.
Yeah.
So when did you start practice or start focusing on family law?
Okay.
So has it been all the way through, or just in the last 10 years or 5 years?
Well, when I first started, I did a bit of everything. It was more general litigation. So I did civil law, civil litigation. I did criminal work. I even acted for clients in death penalty cases. But that took a toll on me. I did it for about 10 years. But each time a client was sentenced to death, it affected me. So after a long while, I just decided to take a break and then and just focus on family law. At least with family law, I can save or put my clients back on track to the next life. But once you lose a client to the death penalty, it was very difficult to move on. So I felt for my own emotional well-being, right? It was better for me to focus on family law. And that has been the case for the last 15 years, only family law now.
Okay, so 15 years.
Yeah.
And then you were talking about this big American corporate company.
Yeah.
And then did you then switch to your own? practice from there?
Yes. Well, I took another step there because what happened was that I love the law, but I'm not really someone who loves running a law firm and worrying about the financial statements, the profit and loss account. It's just not me, right? So what I did was I was asked by ex-students of mine to come and join them in their firm. So I did, but it was only a while. But then the urge to start something on your own, right? And then build something in your own image, in the sense that I wanted it to be a place of learning. I wanted to attract interns, students who say that, look, I want to develop the law. I want to help you and read up on all these cases, and let's see whether we can recommend changes to the law, because that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years, quietly and not so quietly with the Law Society. I've been writing papers and articles and just gently asking for certain amendments to the law. So that are the people I look for now. So I'm blessed with a very good team. I'm the youngest in the team. I'm the youngest, meaning the next youngest is only 29 years old, thereabouts, okay? Okay, so it's in inverted commas when I say I'm the youngest. Everybody else in the firm, they are between 21 and 29.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'm more than double their age, actually.
And your practice is solely a family and private client?
Yes, it's like 95%.
Of this
I get the odd request to just do some simple corporate agreements here and there. Probably as to help old schoolmates and friends, I do that. But yes, the main focus is on family law.
Okay. You mentioned that you were quietly and not so quietly looking at perhaps potential reforms or amendments that could be made. Perhaps you could talk to us a little bit about what perhaps are key concerns or key areas in family law, for example, that you think need a little bit of development, or from your own practice that you might have experienced.
Okay. Now, maybe just a little bit of background.
Of course.
So in Singapore, when we talk about family law, we're actually talking about two systems.
Okay.
You have the civil system, right, under the Women's Charter, we call it. And then we have the Muslim law system. So in Singapore, everybody goes under the Women's Charter for certain things. So for example, during the course of marriage, if there's family violence, then you go to the Women's Charter.
Okay.
But when it comes to divorce and inheritance, that's under the Administration of Muslim Law Act. So that's a separate system. There are some overlaps.
So sorry, 1 second. So this is for Muslims.
The Administration of Muslim Law Act is for Muslims.
So only Muslims can apply to that.
Yes. Yes.
And the Women's Charter is just for women?
No. Okay. It's actually a misnomer. It's for everybody in the family.
Right.
So there are specific rules that govern marriage and divorce. And obviously in a marriage you need to have a husband and a wife. So it's for all. Maybe the reason was probably historical, because it came about in 1963, and in those days maybe they felt that they wanted to push or highlight women's rights, right? But actually it's for everyone. It's for the whole family, right?
Okay.
So because there are two different systems, in Singapore, many lawyers, they either just do the Women's Charter affairs or the Muslim affairs. So there's only a small group of us, but I hope it's growing, and I think it's growing, where we do both. So I think I was one of the early pioneers that did both equally, right? Me and several others, but not many. So they either chose just the civil family law or the Muslim family law.
So just to stop you there, so the Muslim family law, I remember you telling me it's not been around for a long time. Is it still, how many years has it been there?
Well, the Muslim law has been practiced for a long time.
Right.
If you want me to go back to history, right? Okay, I won't go back that far. But when Sir Stamford Raffles landed in Singapore, 1819, and he left a few years later, he actually passed a decree, a law that said that when it comes to the economic and business affairs, you follow the English common law. But when it comes to the local marriage and divorce laws, the local customs will prevail.
Okay.
So that was followed, but it was not in written law.
Right.
Until about 1885, then they came out with the Muhammadan Ordinance, they call it. And then there was a formal laws that legislated for registration of Muslim marriage and divorce. But it was not until 1958 that you had the formation of a Sharia court.
Right.
So before that...
I don't know why in my head I thought it was like the last 10 years,
Oh, no,
1958.
no. Okay, so, but before that, there was a system whereby the Muslim couples will go and see a Qadi right? And a local hitman, for example, who would just record the divorce. But the problem was that there was always confusion because what happened to the house? What happened to the children? So they had to go under the civil system. So it was only in 1958 there was a dedicated Muslim court called the Sharia court that was set up. So it's just celebrated its 65th anniversary recently. Okay, but in terms of development, I think it's fair to say that it was a bit behind the civil courts. Because the civil courts were given all the resources, they had so many judges and all. Whereas the Sharia court, for many years, I think for about 40 years, they only had one judge.
Oh, really?
So you can imagine the difference in resources. One was national resources and the other one was just like, okay, this is only for Muslims. But so when I came into the profession about 30 odd years ago, I was quite appalled by what I saw, and together with some, of course, seniors, we sat down, we discussed, and we wrote papers and articles where we asked that the Sharia court be further developed, more judges, more resources, enhancement of the laws. And what they did was they had the powers that be, they had meetings with us and they said, okay, write papers and all. And it went through Parliament.
Wow.
So I was actually involved in 1998 as a very young lawyer, right? And I still have a photo of me as a young lawyer going to Parliament House and presenting before a select committee,
Wow.
right? On why we wanted these amendments into the law.
That's really, really amazing because you were one of those first people
I'm the only one
make
left
those
actually.
changes.
Okay, still practicing in the profession.
Or have they all kind of gone and done other things now?
One has passed away. One migrated to Australia a long time ago. One went into the corporate world where he doesn't have to go to court anymore. So I'm the only one left who is still practicing. Of course, I was by far the youngest amongst those four. Okay.
So those changes came through. Did it take a long time or?
Well, what we did to hasten the process and for easier buy-in, what we did was we said, look, under the Women's Charter, right, there are already certain codifications. Like, for example, what are the factors for a division of assets, right? Why can't we just incorporate them? But we needed to be very sensitive because when it comes to Muslim law, right, it would be very insensitive for us to draft a law to say that when it comes to division of assets, right, just simply follow the Women's Charter. Because as a community, the question you ask yourself is, don't we have our own laws? Don't we have our own set of principles? Why do you incorporate? So you need to do it in a very sensitive manner. So we took, right, the wordings from the Women's Charter and put them into the AMLA, into the Administration Muslim Law Act, but without overtly saying that we were taking from that. But what we did was important because the powers that be, the government, right, they were okay with it because it would also mean that you harmonize the system. And it made sense from a higher level that you have a system whereby whether you are in the civil courts or whether you go through the Muslim law, the outcome should be fair and just. It shouldn't be a case where if you go to the family court, the women get 50% of the assets. But if you go on the Muslim court, the women get what, 10%, 20%? That would create disharmony in society. So in that sense, it sort of blended in very well.
So my question is now that this has been implemented, is it all smooth sailing now, or is it still need changing, or you think everything's right?
Well, we have to
with the
remember, then although the Sharia Court was set up in 1958, it was more, the laws were then more on the formation of the court. Okay, the AMLA, Administration of Muslim Act, it's not a codified system of laws. It's just how to, what to do, but not the factors behind this and that. So along the way, the body of case law have to come up, right? So I think the court took a long time to develop a very solid body of case law. And over the years, what we have done is that whenever there's a new issue that comes up, and that could not have been foreseen by the lawmakers back in the 50s and 60s, then people like me and the Law Society will raise this up with the authorities and say, why don't we change the laws on this? Why don't we change the laws on that? So that's why it develops. So I give an example, a real life example, right? Now, we had a problem about 10 years ago, not that long ago, right? Where the judges in the Sharia court did not make any order on a child if they found out that the child was conceived before the date of the marriage. because the judge took the view that under Muslim law, that is not a child of a legitimate child of the parties. So, but it had very disastrous consequences. So imagine you have a family of 3 children, and the first one was conceived before marriage, right? There's no court order. Who has custody? What is his status? So then we had to go to the family court and get a court order just for that child.
So you had to switch over.
Right. And then the civil court judge will say, why are you coming here? Because you've got all the other orders in your Sharia court. Why do you come here? And so what we did was, of course, we made some arguments and we wrote papers on this. So the laws have changed. Very recently, only in 2020, the laws have changed that the child, that the Sharia court has jurisdiction over any child of the marriage. So it's regardless whether he was conceived before or during the marriage. If he was brought up as a child of the marriage, then the Sharia court, you can make the order.
Recognizes
And
it.
then it also dovetails very nicely with the civil law, because what is common between the two laws is the best interest of the child. So you don't look at when the child was conceived. You look at the child has been brought up
Yes.
as a member of the family. What is in the best interest of the child? And you don't look at the inheritance rights of the child, because that's a separate issue. You look like now, for the rest of his childhood, if you need an order for him, we should give one for him.
This is really interesting stuff. Did you ask?
Yeah, so perhaps a more practical question for example, a client who may come to see you and say, I'd like to get divorced in perhaps the civil courts. What are some basic sort of level of advice that you would give to someone? Perhaps what documents they would need to provide you, the initial kind of stages of perhaps a divorce in Singapore?
Right. That sounds very much like an exam question I said for my students.
12 marks, please answer.
Okay, yes. Yeah. Okay. But and for me, the starting point for that always is this. I need to ascertain Muslim or non-Muslim marriage.
course.
Because then the first question to ask is,
Which court?
which court?
Yes.
And that's a very fundamental question.
Yes.
So where the parties are both Muslims is very easy. It's the Sharia court.
Sure.
Where the parties are both non-Muslims, it will be under the Women's Charter. Now, but what if one party is Muslim and the other party is a non-Muslim? Because you're speaking of the expat community, right?
Yes.
And that may arise.
Yeah.
Well, the answer is actually very simple. We've clarified it in Singapore. If both parties were married under the Muslim law, regardless of what is their current status, then it will be the Sharia court.
Okay.
You see? So they look at the marriage certificate. How was the marriage brought about? Was it under civil law or Muslim law?
That's quite
So
a
it's-
sensible
yes.
approach, really.
But you have a confusion, because there are countries, England included, where
Yeah.
people have come to us and say, I've got 2 certificates,
I know.
Yes.
Right?
I was just about to say, because some
Yes.
people have the Islamic marriage and then they have the civil marriage.
Yes.
So that means they've got access to both courts?
No. Because we have solved, we have resolved this
Do they
question
take
as
the
well.
first marriage certificate?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, we go by the religion first.
Okay.
So because the laws in Singapore is such, the civil court has jurisdiction over everybody,
Right.
and then there's a clause, except where the marriage is a Muslim marriage. And so even if you have 2 marriage certificates, that clause applies.
Right.
That clause applies. So the parties will then have to go to the Sharia court. Because I've had one, an Egyptian couple. They came to me with 2 certificates, civil and Muslim. And they actually went to the civil courts first, because
Okay.
they went to other lawyers. And they it went through the civil courts. The civil court said, no, you don't come here. You should go to the Sharia court, because you have a Muslim marriage as well.
I think even with the UAE system, it'd be helpful if they
If you clarify,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
It
exactly.
is.
Because we have this issue here as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really helpful. In terms of other, perhaps not hurdles, but things that you have to discuss with your clients at early stages, are there any other aspects that you see quite often in your discussions with clients, in particular divorce clients,
Right.
when you're having perhaps an initial consultation? Do they raise questions in terms of which court to use, and perhaps, what could happen if, for example, my partner wanted to leave Singapore with my child? These kind of questions. Do you see these a lot?
Right. Okay. Wow. I should break this up into parts.
Of course.
So the first one, I'm assuming they are both in Singapore.
Yes.
Okay. Because now there's also a residency requirement.
Okay.
Whether it's the civil courts or the Muslim courts, they've standardized. You need to have been habitually resident in Singapore for at least 3 years first
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Just to file a divorce?
to file the divorce.
So they can't just move there last year?
They could, under the Muslim Law Act before 2017. And then the laws was tightened
To stop them
partly
shopping
because of
around.
me, because I was the naughty one.
Yes.
Because I took a case where I acted for an American woman in a divorce against a British husband. They were both Muslims. They got married in Saudi Arabia, but they had never been to Singapore. But the way the law book was stated in that time, there was no requirement for them to live in Singapore for any period of time. So I argued before the court that as long as they are both Muslims, you have jurisdiction. So the court actually reluctantly gave them the divorce.
Sure.
But at the next round of the amendments, they closed that door. And then they said, okay, and to be consistent with the civil courts, 3 years of habitual residence. But the argument given by the minister in parliament was that, and I think it's fair, is that resources are limited and we do not want to encourage divorce shopping. Right? We don't want people to use Singapore as a destination where get a quick divorce and out you go.
Yeah.
So I think that's fine. That I can live with that. But and 3 years is actually not that long if you think about it, because they can still go back to their home country, right?
So it's 3 years in Singapore, it's 1 year in the UK, and the UAE, there's no time limit.
For now.
Yeah.
But if it gets to a situation where you get hundreds of cases a month,
Sure.
then they may have to rethink it, because it's really about policy and expediency. It's not really law in that sense. It's about housekeeping and case management when you have this residency requirement, right? But okay, so that's where for parties who live in Singapore. But what if, right? One of them says, fine, now that there's problem in the marriage, trouble in paradise, I'm going back.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm going back to England,
Yeah.
right? So then the worry now is this: where is the divorce going to be? Is it in Singapore or back in England? And it's not unusual to then have a very big fight on the
Jurisdiction.
forum, right?
Yes.
Which country? And you know that if if parties don't agree and the lawyers don't agree, that fight alone can take a year and more in resources. I mean, we've all read it in the media, right? And I've gone through some myself, acted for clients. So that's a very big thing.
Okay.
So and it's something that I have to advise clients, because do you really want to start the divorce proceedings here without talking to your wife and all this? Because once you start and she reacts by starting one in England, we're going to have a big fight into. And we've done it. Not just England and Singapore. I've done it with
Lots of
many
countries,
countries.
yeah.
South Africa, US.
But my question is, when you're talking to people who are living in Singapore, regardless if one person wants to leave, where do you, what advice are you giving? Are you saying to them, Singapore is better? When you're advising them, this is what we do. We say, look, UAE is good for these reasons, UK is good for these reasons. Then we work out where they should divorce before we decide if there's going to be an argument or not. So when you're talking about Singapore, if you can just highlight the benefits first of why Singapore court would be better than, for example, Australia or UK or South Africa.
Okay. Well, I would like to think that in an ideal world, all the laws are the same, right? But if that were true, you wouldn't be asking me this question, right? So there's always this thing is, we're talking about outcomes, right? We're talking about, if I were to have the divorce in Singapore, what would the outcome be? As compared to what would the outcome be if I were to divorce in England? It comes down to that, right?
Yes.
And usually it's in the division of assets. Because I think laws with regard to children are more or less the same everywhere in the world. It's always what's in the best interest of the child, etc., etc. But when it comes to the assets, there are some countries where almost automatically it's 50-50. So some wives who have contributed a lot more, right, to the marriage, whether financially or non-financially, they feel that, that's not good enough. I mean, he relied on me. I was the main breadwinner, actually. So they want more. And similarly, or you flip it around, husbands may feel the same way. So what they do is that I've got husbands asking me, saying that what's the benefit of having in Singapore as against England? And then we lay down, right? Because you get your expert opinion from England and you get your expert opinion from Singapore. And they say, in England, my wife is going to get 50-50. But in Singapore, she's not likely to get 50-50 because the judges don't just give 50-50 automatically. They look at your financial contribution and then they look at your non-financial. And then you do a ratio.
So with the UK, it's not always, we say starting point 50-50, but no one really gets 50.
Okay.
Same thing, they look at who's done what and they make sure that each person is not leaving the marriage without, it's fair. So is Singapore similar? Would you say,
Yes.
do you do financial disclosure?
Yes.
So you do it fully? Like, do you have forms that you have to complete? Like, what's the process of working out who's paid what debts they've got?
Yes.
So there's a whole procedure.
Yes.
Perfect.
Well, as a principal, there's a duty to make full and frank disclosure. But let's be honest, I think the application of that differs from client to client.
Yes.
I mean, we've all had cases where I'm acting for the wife, and the wife said, "Oh, come on! He expects me to believe that this is all he has.
Yeah.
You know, he's always flying around the world.
Yeah.
You know, so it cannot be. He must have other sources of income. He's got some properties somewhere else. Yeah, so it's always difficult. I mean, I had a case, right, where the husband was in England and the wife in Singapore.
Yeah.
When it came to the disclosure part, he produced 6 bank accounts from English banks. Each had only £1. Come on.
That's absurd.
And then we downloaded his Instagram. He was posing in front of Rolls Royces and in private jets, and he said, lifestyle of a multimillionaire.
Oh,
Come
good.
on. But when we fought this in court, it was funny because we said, look at this. It cannot be that he just says no money. And he said, oh, this is just advertising. Oh, come on.
So we had a similar case. So
Yes.
he had a lot of money and he was putting things up on TikTok and going on these holidays, 5-star trips, helicopters to Dubai. And then he was saying to the court, I'm filing bankruptcy. So then the court obviously asked for some evidence and we sent all the social media. So he said, I'm not going to make a judgment, but it seems he has money. So I don't know where this claim's coming from unless you provide evidence. So yeah, it's very similar in the UK, and the court made orders that everything gets transferred to her.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So that last part, I think in Singapore, we call it adverse inference.
Yes.
Because if you keep saying you don't have anything or you don't have much, right? But it's beyond logic. When we show all this other, the court actually has the power to give that X amount, right? And say that, look, I'm not relying on what you are telling me. I don't believe what you're saying. The judge has given me some credible, right, basis that you are worth a lot more. Then the judge has very wide discretionary powers, and she can up the percentage.
That's very similar to you.
That adverse inference is a very powerful tool.
The UK is very similar as well.
Very.
To be honest, they're not stupid.
Yes.
You know, so the judges have got a lot of experience. They've seen this.
Yes.
They know when someone's talking rubbish, to be honest.
£1 in your account. I mean, he should have just put a few $1,000s in, right? It would have been more believable.
It's very unrealistic.
Yeah.
So perhaps a theoretical question about where you see your career going in the next few years, perhaps, because you've had such an interesting career so far. You've got any big plans?
You made all these big changes.
Yeah,
you've
done a
brought
lot.
you're teaching.
I'm big on milestones.
Yes.
So I always had milestones like when I'm 30, when I'm 40.
Sure.
So my last milestone was when I'm 55,
Yeah.
which was just 2 years ago. And that was when I said, look, I'm going to open up my own firm.
Of course.
And I'm going to devote more time, right, to actually teaching and the development of law. So, but maybe I've bitten more than I can chew, because when I look at my calendar now, the speaking engagements and the promises to write articles, they're giving me a bit of nerves in that sense. It's just how to fit it all the time. But what I'm doing is that I'm surrounding myself, hence the young people, with a lot of young people, because they have the energy. But I want the desire as well. I want young people who are curious and who want to learn, right? And are prepared to break the norms and not just look as, but the law is like that. It's always been like that. No, I want people who like, no, why should it be like that?
Right.
You know, let's change the law. What's wrong if we do this and that? So that's the type of people I'm looking for.
So it's like the thinking and the training of the younger generation, basically.
Yes. I mean, I'm 57 years old, and I'll say this: when I attended your session yesterday, I was taking down notes like a schoolboy. You know, I was taking down everything I was learning, and said, I need to go back and look up on this case that was mentioned and that case that was mentioned, because that's what I do, and that's what I look out. I in a way, it sounds weird because I said like, I'm looking out for mini-me's, but that's the best thing to do.
So honestly, when I first met you, and you talk about the young generation, I think your energy, even you say that you're old or you're not old, but your energy and just the way you're so passionate about what you do, it really comes across. And the fact that you've done all these things, I was really fascinated. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
You know, and when we had dinner the other night and you told me the whole story about how you started, and it was fascinating. I could listen for hours.
Yes.
So, you know, we're really, really honoured to have you, you know, on this as a
Yeah.
guest.
Yeah.
And we wish we could talk to you for like another hour because we would learn a lot more.
Yes,
Because we're still obviously a young firm where, you know, we're learning new things and we want to talk to experienced lawyers. And, you know, the good thing about this show is we want expat experts all over the world. So that, you know, you come from Singapore, so we've got you on and we're like, let's get him to ask him, get him to talk about what he does. You didn't bring us a copy of the book.
I'm sorry.
I think it'd be really interesting, but I think what you've achieved in
Yeah.
your career is fantastic.
Yeah, and I love teaching,
Yeah.
right? So every year, whenever they ask me, do you want to continue for another year? I hesitate for about 2 seconds because do I have the time? But after 2 seconds, yes, okay. And then whenever I go for because I teach mainly in the evenings because of my work, and to be honest with you, it's very tiring, you know, to teach, to go somewhere and teach at 7 p.m. at night. But for that 3 hours, wow, I love it so much, and I love interactive students, right? And then from there, right, I'm actually very glad to say that I think the subject has gained recognition in Singapore.
Yeah.
Since last year, it is now part of the curriculum for all lawyers in Singapore. Meaning, you know, you have to do they call it the Part B, which is like the Singapore Bar. And from last year, for the very first time, every young lawyer entrant to the profession now must know the basics of Muslim family law.
So it's mandatory.
Yes, it's mandatory. Yes,
Wow.
it's an exam subject now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so who's teaching this subject? Is it just you at the moment?
Oh, just me.
Just you. So you've got your hands full.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, because all these students have to now do it.
Yes.
Oh my God. I
Yeah.
didn't realize.
That's so impressive.
And then you've got the practice running, and then you said you still go to court.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's brilliant. So you're academic, you're a lecturer, and then obviously you're a
Oh yeah,
practicing lawyer.
and I mediate as well, so I'm also a mediator.
Yeah, mediate. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
because you were talking. Yeah, I remember you talking to the mediators, and I didn't know that till you mentioned it yesterday. So you do that. That's also something you've got to make time for as well, right?
Yes. So basically, if I have one Saturday where I'm not teaching or mediating, right, it's like, wow, what do I do?
There's always something going on.
There's always something going on.
So we're going to leave you with our last question because you've come on our show. Is what was I was trying to remember the question.
So if I think it's
expert. So we want to
Yeah.
end every podcast session that
Okay.
we're doing with a question to say, what advice would you give anyone? Because you're obviously an expert in your area. What advice you would give as an expert in your field to anyone who listening today? What's your expertise or any kind of advice or any
To an expat.
Yeah, or no, expats or anyone. What
Okay.
kind of advice would you give anybody from your kind of pearls of wisdom of life or teaching or law? Like, what do you want to give?
Well, I'm biased. So when you ask me about teaching and all, it's of course what do you call it? Never hold back on your passion. I did hold back. I realized for many years. But when, in the last few years, when I agreed to teach in the universities, when I started writing more, I found that it was more fulfilling, right? Because it's like you think a lot, right? But when you put down on paper and when you deliver it to a class, to a seminar, you just feel it's going somewhere, right? Instead of sitting in a bar room or coffee shop.
It's like a legacy, isn't it?
You're right. In fact, there was an article on me by the Singapore Academy of Law when the book was launched, and the title of the article was "Leaving a Legacy."
Yeah.
Because that's what the
That is
interviewer
what I would say
he
as
described
well.
me.
Yeah.
He said, after talking to you, that's what you're trying to tell me. You want to leave a legacy, and I do. And that's why whenever someone says it to me that I have your book, wow, I just get
I know.
a feeling about it.
So I
because-
think we hopefully will call you. So if you're in Dubai next time, we're going to call you again,
Okay.
and then we can touch. Maybe you can bring your book,
Oh, I must.
and then we can talk a little bit more about like the other
I'm
things as well.
I'm really looking at the second edition actually.
You should.
No, because it was
There's
like
more case law, right?
Yes, and that book was actually a compilation of 30 years of research because there was no materials, there was no case laws. I had to build up my own library from scratch, and I only had to And when I was asked to teach at the university, right, I had to make study notes for the students, and then I realized that these studies should be shared and turned into a book. Yeah.
Amazing.
We just think you're a brilliant person to know, a brilliant
Definitely.
lawyer, a brilliant mind, and I think
Yeah.
you definitely are.
No, passionate.
Yeah, very passionate.
There's a lot
and
more
that comes
clever
across.
people than me. Yeah.
No, that definitely comes across, and I think you're just your personality, everything. You're just brilliant. I think everyone that met you yesterday at our event as well were like, "Oh, he's lovely, he's so nice." But thank you so much for coming.
Now I'm blushing.
Thank you
we
very
will,
much.
we will definitely call you again if you're in Dubai when we're doing these sessions, and you have to keep in touch. And we will definitely be talking to you soon. But thank you again.
My
Thank
pleasure. Thank you
you.
both of you. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Samara and Alexandra.
Welcome. Thank you.